Hey yo, my CPU was sitting at 100% usage and somebody told me I was bottlenecking. How does bottlenecking work? So, bottlenecking is when one component in your PC can't keep up with the other component and it slows down the overall performance. Most of the time, it's the CPU and the GPU kind of fighting for balance. Okay, so why can't they just work at the same speed? So think of it like this. The CPU is the manager and the GPU is the worker. The CPU organizes tasks like game physics, AI, and sending draw calls, which are basically instructions for what the GPU should render. And if the manager can't send those instructions fast enough, then the worker just kind of sits around twiddling their thumbs. So that's like the CPU bottleneck I was talking about. Exactly. So the GPU is ready to work, but the CPU can't really feed it data fast enough. You'll see this in games that rely really heavily on calculations like strategy games such as StarCraft or open world titles with a lot of NPCs like Assassin's Creed. Your GPU usage will also go down and your frame rates will usually tank. Okay, so what about a GPU bottleneck? So that's the opposite. In this case, the CPU is handling its tasks really good, but the GPU can't keep up. So this happens if you're running a graphically intense game with a weaker GPU. So the CPU is sending instructions, but the GPU is struggling to render them fast enough. In this case, you'll notice that the GPU usage is stuck at 100%, while the CPU is really low and just kind of chilling. So how do I figure out which one's giving me the problem? So to figure out what's going on, I'd probably use performance monitoring tools like MSI Afterburner or even just using your task manager. If your GPU is running at less than 80% usage while gaming, it's probably a CPU bottleneck. And if the GPU is maxed out but the CPU usage is low, then maybe your GPU is struggling. Okay, and is it always one or the other? So not always. Sometimes it's game specific. Some games hit the CPU super hard while others push the GPU to its limits. And things like RAM speed and storage can create really small bottlenecks too. So let's say I'm building a new PC. How do I make sure I don't bottleneck? I really think the key is balance. So if you pair a mid-range GPU like an RTX 4060 with a mid-range CPU like a Ryzen 5 7600, you'll be good. But if you're splurging on a high-end GPU like a 4090, you also want to make sure the CPU is top tier like an i9. And don't forget to consider the resolution. So high resolutions like 4K shift the workload more onto the GPU, so the CPU bottleneck matters a little bit less right there. What about overclocking? Does that help? Overclocking can reduce bottlenecks, especially on the CPU side. A few extra gigahertz might help it keep up with the demand in GPU. You just have to watch your temps and make sure your power draw isn't too high.